Good evening, everyone. I feel honored to be addressing you this evening. I've spent most of my life trying to understand the world I was born into, and I can claim some modest success. At a relatively early age, I recognized that our understanding is inherently imperfect. That's because we are part of the world in which we live. We are both participants and observers. As participants, we want to change the world in our favor. As observers, we want to understand reality as it is. These two objectives interfere with each other. The interference doesn't affect all domains of reality equally. For instance, natural scientists that, like astronomists, can obtain practically perfect knowledge because they have an objective criterion, like the movement of the stars, that allows them to judge whether their predictions are correct. Social scientists don't have it so easy. People's behavior already reflects their imperfect understanding. Therefore, it doesn't provide as reliable a criterion for social scientists as the movement of the stars does for astronomers. So, how can we understand the current state of affairs? We must find a way to distinguish what is important from what is less so. Let me start with a bold assertion. While two systems of governance are engaged in a fight for global domination, our civilization is in danger of collapsing because of the inexorable advance of climate change. This is a very succinct statement, but I believe it provides an accurate summary of the current state of affairs. My statement links climate change, which is mainly natural science material, with systems of governance, which is a social concept. I'll discuss climate change first, and then systems of governance later. I've always been fascinated by the Greenland ice sheet, which is several kilometers deep and has built up over 1,000 years. In July 2022, an extreme weather event occurred in Greenland. It was so warm that scientists there could play volleyball in short-sleeved shirts and shorts. When I saw this, I sent a team of photographers to Greenland to gather visual evidence. They were present when a second event occurred in September, and they recorded it live. The melting of the Greenland ice sheet affects acid would increase the level of the oceans by 7 meters. That poses a threat to the survival of our civilization. I wasn't willing to accept that fate, so I tried to find out whether anything could be done about it. I was directed to Sir David King, climate scientist who has been chief scientific advisor to previous British governments. He had developed a theory which is widely shared by climate scientists. It holds that the global climate system used to be stable, but human intervention disrupted it. The Arctic Circle used to be sealed off from the rest of the world by winds that blew in a predictable circular counterclockwise direction. But man-made climate science broke this isolation. The circular wind used to keep cold air inside the Arctic Circle and warm air out. Now the cold air leaks out from the Arctic and is replaced by warm air sucked in from the south. This explains, among other things, the Arctic blast that hit the United States last Christmas and the cold wave that hit Texas more recently. The Arctic Ocean used to be covered pristine snow and ice that reflected the sunshine in what is called the albedo effect. But rising temperatures have caused the ice to melt, and the Greenland ice sheet is no longer so pristine. It's covered by soot from last year's forest fires on the west coast of America, Arctic shipping, and other causes. Sir David has a plan to repair the climate system. He wants to recreate the albedo effect by creating white clouds high above the Earth. With proper scientific safeguards and in consultation with local indigenous communities, this project could help re-stabilize the Arctic climate system, which governs the entire global climate system. The message is clear. Human interference has destroyed a previously stable system, and human ingenuity, both local and international, will be needed to restore it. We must reorient our international financial institutions, particularly the World Bank, to focus on climate change. The president of the World Bank, David Malpass, who was a climate denier, resigned yesterday. Since pictures can be more powerful than words, I'd like to show you a short video of the melting of the Greenland ice sheet with commentary by Sir David King.
Climate change in the Arctic Circle region is a grave threat to the manageable future of all of humanity. The sea ice covering the Arctic Sea has been melting more and more rapidly over the last 30 years due to climate change and global warming. The challenge is such that what we do over the next 10 years is probably going to determine the future of humanity for the next few thousand years. Unless we act quickly, by mid-century, all of our coastal cities would be unmanageable. For example, 90% of the landmass of Vietnam will be under seawater at least once a year, less than 30 years from now. Where do the people go who are subject to being underwater? What level of migration does that lead to? The consequences are severe. Here is the Russell Glacier melting rapidly, causing that great river of water to flow into the ocean. It's black, it's darkened, and that is due to the arrival of soot from fires in the west, from burning forests, etc. And then the ice melts much more rapidly. When all of the ice is melted, global sea levels will have risen by 7 meters, or 23 feet. But we must anticipate severe impact on our coastal cities within a few decades. There's another big threat that we have. The permafrost melting in the land surrounding the Arctic Sea causes rapid explosive release of methane. If it was all released over a 20-year period, global temperatures might rise by 5 to 8 degrees centigrade. Now clearly, these sea level rises and temperature rises and changes in global weather systems must be avoided. We need to actually return to an understanding of the importance of our ecological systems to our future. We are part of that ecology, and that's very clear because at the moment, we human beings, all of us together, are destroying the ecosystems that we depend on. The Centre for Climate Repair at Cambridge is working with global partners on the actions urgently needed to create a manageable future for humanity. This involves 3 R's. We need to reduce emissions deeply and rapidly. We need to remove excess greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. But perhaps the most pressing, we need to refreeze the Arctic. To buy time to enable us to manage those 2 first R's. Now, how could we refreeze the Arctic? The most promising method, in our view, is to cool the Arctic Circle region during the polar summer by a method involving white cloud cover over the Arctic Circle during the 3 polar summer months. This would reflect sunlight away from the ice layer, formed over the Arctic Sea during the polar winter, with year-on-year growth of the last ice layer. A marine engineer, Stephen Salter, has designed a marine vessel which could create white clouds. This imitates the natural process that occurs when waves break over the ocean, creating tiny droplets of seawater which can be carried upwards by warm wind. As they travel up, each droplet loses water as vapor, leaving a salt crystal so small it is invisible, less than a micron in diameter. A cloud of these salt crystals then hovers in the upper atmosphere, and each crystal again attracts water vapor to recreate a tiny droplet. The accumulation of tiny droplets forms a white, bright cloud. However, we also need to produce the tiny droplets of water at scale. A vast number of tiny droplets of water need to be generated, and without using energy input that would be just as damaging as the normal processes of global warming. This is a very clever design in which the energy is picked up from the motion of the water currents and from the wind. And so potentially all of the energy needed can be obtained from these renewable sources. We would need 500 to 1,000 vessels around the Arctic operated remotely in the 3 polar summer months. We're faced with this enormous challenge that we've all created for ourselves. Somehow, I feel what could emerge is a better understanding between nations as we all deal with a common threat. What we're trying to do is return the Earth to a livable planet.
Now I should like to turn to geopolitics. There are 2 systems of governance that are fighting for global domination. I'm talking about open and closed societies. I have defined the difference between them as simply as I can. In an open society, the role of the state is to protect the freedom of the individual. In a closed society, the role of the individual is to serve the interests of the state. As the founder of the Open Society Foundations, open societies are obviously close to my heart, and I consider them morally superior to closed ones. When we talk about moral superiority, however, we encounter a difficulty. Both systems consider themselves superior. Open societies must therefore distinguish themselves by actually protecting the freedom of the individual. That would certainly attract people living in closed societies. Of course, repressive states may still prevail because they may be able to force their subjects to serve them. The fact is that both systems have their strengths and weaknesses. By understanding them better, we can improve our understanding of the world. I have distinguished between open and closed societies. That leaves out many countries that have grown to great lengths to avoid tying themselves irrevocably to one system or the other. India is an interesting case. It's a democracy, but its leader, Narendra Modi, is no Democrat. Inciting violence against Muslims was an important factor in his meteoric rise. Modi maintains close relations with both open and closed societies. India is a member of the Quad, which also includes Australia, the US, and Japan. But it buys a lot of Russian oil at a steep discount and makes a lot of money out of it. Erdogan's Turkey is perhaps even more interesting. He's actively engaged with both sides of the Ukrainian war and established himself as a neutral intermediary between them. Erdogan has much in common with Modi, but while Modi seemed to be firmly in the saddle until recently, Erdogan has mismanaged the Turkish economy, and he will face elections in May. All his efforts are focused on winning the elections. He moves closer to Putin, who will make Turkey a distribution hub of Russian oil, which will give him the money he needs for the elections. He also became more autocratic at home. He is trying to jail his most powerful opponent, the mayor of Istanbul, and to ban the Kurdish party from participating in the elections. But he will not be able to break the tradition that allows the political parties to supervise the counting of the votes. That will make it difficult to falsify the results. The 7.8 magnitude earthquake that hit Turkey earlier this month is a tragedy. The shock is turning into anger in many affected areas because the government's slow response and desire to control all aid efforts. This was not fate. Turkey's lax construction practices and Erdogan's construction-driven growth made everything worse. The best way to address these issues is to hold elections. Reverting to India, Modi and business tycoon Adani are close allies. Their fate is intertwined. Adani Enterprises tried to raise funds in the stock market but failed. Adani is accused of stock manipulation and his stock collapsed like a house of cards. Modi is silent on the subject, but he will have to answer questions from foreign investors and in Parliament. This will significantly weaken Modi's stranglehold on India's federal government and open the door to push for much-needed institutional reforms. I may be naive, but I expect a democratic revival in India. There are many other regional powers that can influence the course of history. Brazil stands out. The election of Lula at the end of last year was crucial. On January 8, there was a coup attempt, much like January 6, 2021 in the US. Lula handled it masterfully and established his authority as president. Brazil is in the forefront of the conflict between open and closed societies. It is also on the forefront of the fight against climate change. He must protect the rainforests, promote social justice, and reignite economic growth all at the same time. He will need strong international support because there is no pathway to net zero emissions if he fails. The current situation has some similarities with the Cold War, but the differences are much greater. There is a real war going on in Ukraine, and that has changed everything. Until October, Ukraine was winning on the battlefield. Then Russia, with the help of Iran, introduced drones on a large scale. Their aim was to deprive the civilian population of electricity, heat and water, and undermine their morale. This has put Ukraine on the defensive. The regular Russian army is in a desperate state. It is badly led, ill-equipped, and demoralized. Putin recognized this and took a desperate gamble. He turned to Yevgeny Prigozhin, who owns an army of mercenaries called the Wagner Group, and is eager to prove to Putin that he can do better than the regular army. Prigozhin has a criminal background and knows how to deal with criminals. Putin allowed him to recruit prisoners from jail. That violates Russian law, but Putin doesn't obey any laws. The gamble worked. With the prisoners' help, Wagner started gaining territory. The Ukrainian army slowed down their advance, but it lost more than 100 trained soldiers a day, which it couldn't afford. Ukraine faced a strategic decision, a choice. Either get bogged down in holding Wagner at bay, or hand Russia a propaganda victory and preserve its limited resources for a counterattack. On December 22nd, Ukrainian President Zelensky flew to Washington to discuss the situation with President Biden. They agreed that the only way to end the war is to win it. But Biden warned Zelensky that there were limits on what he's willing to do. A third world war must be avoided at all costs, and European support for Ukraine must be preserved. The Biden administration is providing Ukraine with the weapons, air defense, tanks, and plenty of ammunition which are needed to defend Ukraine, defeat Russian assault. But opposition from the Republican House of Representatives makes another large bipartisan funding package from the U.S. unlikely. Zelensky went on a diplomatic offensive in European countries, urging them to deliver more tanks faster. He also asked for fighter planes, and European countries have agreed to start training Ukrainian pilots to fly state-of-the-art fighter planes. Prigozhin has been ordered by Putin to produce a victory before the anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on February 24th. He's trying to surround the Ukrainian defenders of the town of Bakhmut, where he enjoys a numerical superiority. It is possible that he will succeed, but I consider unlikely because the Ukrainian army is putting up strong resistance, and once Ukraine can use the weapons it has been promised, the tables will be turned. But Moldova's president, Maya Sandu, warned that Putin is planning a coup d'etat against Moldova. That threat could be executed before the anniversary. On February 11th, Prigozhin gave an interview to The Guardian in which he admitted that he won't be able to trap the Ukrainian defenders of Bakhmut. There are many roads out and fewer roads in, he said. He took a 2 to 3 year perspective talking about occupying the Donbass. This gives Ukraine a narrow window of opportunity later this spring when it can receive the promised armament to mount a counterattack which would determine the fate of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The countries of the former Soviet Union can hardly wait to see the Russians defeated in Ukraine because they want to assert their independence. That means that Ukrainian victory would result in the dissolution of the Russian Empire. Russia would no longer pose a threat to Europe and the world. That would be a big change for the better. It would bring huge relief for open societies and create tremendous problems for closed ones. Turning to China, Xi Jinping would be an obvious loser. His close association with Putin would hurt him, but China may be already undergoing a revolution. Most of Xi Jinping's problems are self-inflicted. He started to mismanaging the economy right from the moment the beginning of his rule, when he went out of his way to undo Deng Xiaoping's reformist achievements. Xi's zero COVID policy was his biggest blunder. It imposed enormous hardship on the population and brought them to the verge of open rebellion. Then, responding to popular pressure, Xi suddenly abandoned the policy without putting anything else in its place. The result was Armageddon. Without proper inoculations, infections spread like wildfire. Hospitals and morgues were overwhelmed, and an untold number of people, most of them elderly, died within a very short period of time. The regime stopped providing information, but people could see what was going on when their relatives and friends began to die. The first wave of infections peaked in January. The second wave, which is rural, is going to do that just about now. But it will another month or so to take this health system to start functioning again. The chaotic way Xi Jinping exited zero COVID shook the Chinese people's trust in the Communist Party under Xi's leadership. The current situation fulfills all the preconditions for regime change or revolution. But that is only the beginning of an opaque process whose repercussions will be felt over a longer period of time. In the short term, Xi is likely to remain in power because he is in firm control of all instruments of repression. But I am convinced that Xi will not remain in office for life, and while he is in office, China will not become the dominant military and political force that Xi is aiming for. Fortunately for Xi, he is not personally threatened from abroad because Biden is not interested in regime change in China. All he wants is to re-establish the status quo in Taiwan. Due to his weak position at home, Xi responded positively to Biden's offer to lower the temperature between the United States and China when they met in Bali. But the discovery of a Chinese surveillance balloon traversing the length of the U.S. soured relations, and it's on its way to poison them altogether. Preliminary examination of the remains of that balloon indicate that it was designed to spy on military targets, not for meteorological observations. In any case, Xi Jinping's conversion to cooperation would have been only temporary and tactical. He would not be the man who he is if he could abandon his deeply felt beliefs so easily. The fact is, we are witnessing a historic process in China whose significance is not widely appreciated. To complete the geopolitical picture, I must also examine how democracy is functioning in the United States. Obviously not very well. When Donald Trump became president in 2016, he posed a real threat to our democracy. Trump is a deeply flawed character, a confidence trickster whose narcissism grew into a disease. He feels no commitment to democracy. Democracy merely provides him with a stage on which to perform. As president, he was more interested in hobnobbing with dictators than in promoting democratic principles. Trump's model was Putin, who amassed a fortune while asserting total control over his country. Trump attracted a lot of non-educated white followers, but his biggest backers were the mega rich, and he certainly delivered for them. First, he cut their taxes. Second, he nominated to the Supreme Court ideologues who embraced an extreme version of the Republican agenda. Third, he brought the Republican Party under his control by threatening those who didn't swear loyalty to him with a challenge in the primaries. Lastly, he encouraged Republican-controlled states to introduce outrageous measures of voter suppression to ensure that his party would remain in power indefinitely. With that program, he was almost re-elected in 2020. My hope for 2024 is that Trump and Governor DeSantis of Florida will slug it out for the Republican nomination. Trump has turned into a pitiful figure, continually bemoaning his loss in 2020. Big Republican donors are abandoning him in droves. DeSantis is shrewd, ruthless, and ambitious. He is likely to be a Republican candidate. This could induce Trump, whose narcissism has turned into a disease, to run as a third-party candidate. That would lead to a Democratic landslide and force the Republican Party to reform itself. But perhaps I may be just a little bit biased. To conclude, I will repeat what I said at the beginning. While open and closed societies are in a fight for global domination, our civilization is in danger of collapsing because of the inevitable advance of climate change. I believe that this sums up the current state of affairs accurately. I also believe that an open society is superior to a closed one. And I grieve for people who must live under repressive regimes like Assad, Syria, Belarus, Iran, and Myanmar. Thank you.